My daughter called me at 1 in the morning. "Dad, open up. It's cold out here," she said, her voice shaking. There would have been nothing strange about that if Claire hadn't been dead for 4 years. I froze by the door while the landline kept ringing in the dark. And before I go any further, I'm going to ask you for one thing. If you're listening to this on your phone, tap like and hit subscribe. Stay with me until the very end and tell me in the comments what city you're listening from, so I know how far this story has traveled, because everything began the night the phone in my house rang at the exact moment the old wall clock struck 1 and shattered the silence with a single lonely chime. I was 68, and at that age you wake up at midnight only to go to the bathroom, not because someone calls you. I opened my eyes with my heart pounding against my ribs. The bedroom was half dark. The bedside lamp threw faint shadows on the walls, and outside a light drizzle whispered against the roof. I groped for my glasses on the nightstand and pushed myself upright, my knees protesting with every movement. The phone rang again, faster this time, as if whoever was on the other end was losing patience. "I'm coming," I muttered without a sound, crossing the hallway toward the living room, alone in that house that had been too big ever since my wife Martha died 5 years ago and my daughter Claire 4. I reached for the white receiver that hung on the wall beside the television. The ringing stopped a second before my fingers touched it, and just when I was about to sigh with relief, it shrieked again, right by my ear. My hand was shaking. I lifted it. "Hello?" My voice came out hoarse. For a few seconds, all I heard was the far-off murmur of rain, as if the phone line were plugged directly into the sky. Then, very softly, a woman spoke. "Dad." I turned to ice. That gentle voice with that tiny crack at the end of each word was the same one that used to call me from the kitchen. It was Claire's voice. A cold shiver slid down my neck. "Who is this?" I forced myself to ask, trying to sound reasonable. "Who are you?" "Dad, it's me," she whispered. "Dad, open the door. It's cold outside." My legs turned to water. I told myself it had to be a dream, some cruel prank, or the final proof that I was losing my mind at last, just like I sometimes feared in my own prayers. "Don't joke about that," I said slowly, trying to sound firm. "My daughter died 4 years ago." On the other end, I heard her take a long, held breath. Then that voice said a sentence that split every memory in me straight down the middle. "Dad, when we're afraid of the dark, we turn the light on inside our hearts." The world stopped. That sentence was ours, invented together one night when the power went out and little Claire cried in the dark. From then on, every time she was scared, I repeated it. I never told anyone. I never wrote it down anywhere. What? Who are you?" My voice barely came out. "Dad, it's Claire," the voice answered, with a certainty that stung. "I'm freezing. Please open the door." I looked toward the entryway. From the living room, I could see the silhouette of the front door frame. It felt as if something were dragging me there. My feet started to move on their own, the receiver glued to my ear. "If you're really Claire," I whispered, "tell me what color your first umbrella was." There was a brief silence, and then she answered without hesitation. "Blue." I couldn't breathe. "A little blue umbrella you bought me at Maple Street Market. That time we came home soaked because you forgot to bring one for yourself. You were so mad at yourself, but I laughed the whole way." I almost dropped the phone. That memory was too precise. I had never told anyone. I reached the door. The living room light barely brushed the wood. The porch light was off. My hand closed on the doorknob. "Where are you now?" I asked, my voice down to a thread. "Right here in front of the house," she replied, and her voice seemed to come from 2 places at once, from the receiver and faintly from the other side of the door. "Please open up. I can't stand the cold." I hung up very slowly and set the phone on the small table. My heart hammered in my temples. I leaned forward and looked through the peephole. I saw her. Claire was standing in the drizzle, soaked, her dark hair roughly pulled back, the grey jacket she always wore clinging to her body. Her face was pale, but it was the face I knew by heart, the one I saw every day in photos, in dreams, and on the headstone at the cemetery. She lifted her head directly toward the peephole as if she knew I was watching. Our eyes met through the tiny circle of glass. Her lips curved into a slight smile, the one she used to calm me down when she was a child. I saw her mouth form a word with no sound. Dad. Even without hearing it, I knew exactly what she was saying. Dad, you still keep my letter behind your wedding photo, don't you? I staggered back and bumped into the wall. The letter, a little note she had written in elementary school and hidden behind the frame of my wedding picture with Martha, was our secret. Only she and I knew it was there. No one else could possibly know that detail. I reached blindly for something to hold on to, breathing in short, sharp gulps. Outside, that figure, whatever it was, knocked gently on the door with the same rhythm she used when she came home late and was afraid I would scold her. Knock, knock, knock. Dad, open up, please. Her voice seemed to seep right through the wood. Tears slid down my cheeks. Nostalgia and terror tangled into a knot in my chest. How was it possible that a daughter I had buried 4 years earlier was standing on my porch? I stayed frozen for a few seconds that felt like hours, and in the end, I did the only thing that came to mind. I turned the key. The door creaked, and I opened it just a few inches. On the other side, there was only cold, damp night air. I held my breath behind the narrow gap. The wind blew in with the smell of wet earth. No one stood there, no Claire, nobody. Only the dark yard, the fine drizzle, and the slow sway of the tree in the back. Claire, I whispered. No answer, no more knocking. The phone on the small table had fallen silent. I closed the door again with trembling hands and slid the deadbolt twice, as if I could lock fear out. My chest burned. I leaned my back against the door, trying to catch my breath. Maybe this is a dream, I thought. Maybe I'm awake, but my mind is still trapped in some nightmare. I went back to the bedroom. The clock kept ticking, each second louder than it had ever sounded before. I sat on the edge of the bed with the light on, staring blankly at the closet. I don't know what time exhaustion finally knocked me out. When morning light seeped through the curtains, it stabbed my eyes. My head felt heavy, my neck stiff, and a strange mix of fatigue and anxiety sat in my chest. For a moment I tried to believe it had all been a long, muddled dream until I opened the front door. As I turned the key, cold morning air slipped in, smelling of damp soil and leftover rain. I looked down at the porch floor. There were wet footprints on the tiles, small and bare, as if someone had been standing there for a long time, shivering. I grabbed the door frame to keep from collapsing. My heart took off again in a wild sprint. The footprints trailed a little toward the gate and vanished where the ground was already dry. On the doorknob, I saw a faint dark mark, the print of a wet hand on the wood. I swallowed hard. If it had all been a dream, why were the footprints still there? Andrew, you just need sleep, I told myself aloud, using my own name the way my mother used to when she scolded me. You're old, you think too much. Don't believe everything you see. Even so, the cold at the back of my neck wouldn't go away. Around 9 o'clock the gate buzzer rang. I jumped and looked out the window. It was my neighbor, Mr. Roger, pajama pants still twisted at the waist and a cap tilted on his head. Beside him stood his wife, Mrs. Teresa, holding a plastic bag. I stepped onto the porch, forcing a smile. Good morning, Mr. Roger. Good morning, Mrs. Teresa, I greeted. Morning, Mr. Andrew, he replied. Everything okay? I saw your living room light on at 1 in the morning. Did something happen? I told him I'd simply forgotten to turn it off, that it was nothing, just trouble sleeping. Don't think so much, Mr. Roger advised. At our age, if you keep your mind spinning, you end up sick. He handed me the bag. We brought you some bananas from the farm. I thanked them and invited them in for a moment, although my eyes kept drifting back to the fading footprints on the porch. We sat in the living room on the wicker chairs, but I couldn't hold it in for long. Mrs. Teresa studied my face. Andrew, why are you so pale? She asked. Did something happen? I hesitated, and without really knowing why, I started to talk. I didn't tell them everything, but I did tell them a lot. The call at 1, the voice that sounded like Claire, the knocking at the door. It must have been such a vivid dream that it clung to your waking mind, Mr. Rogers said, trying to reassure me. It happens to me sometimes. I dream my mother is alive, and when I wake up I can still smell her on the pillow. That's nostalgia. Mrs. Teresa nodded. Pray, Mr. Andrew, she advised. Ask God to calm your heart, and if you need to, go see a therapist so you can feel more at peace. It helps to talk. I smiled weakly. Inside, I didn't fully believe their words, but we parted with all the usual courtesy, and when the gate clicked shut again, the house fell back into silence. The footprints on the porch had vanished completely, dried away as if the night itself had evaporated. At noon, my son-in-law, Julian, arrived. His white car stopped in front of the house. He stepped out in a perfectly pressed pale blue shirt, dress pants, his inseparable leather briefcase slung across his shoulder, hair slicked back, his face calm, pleasant, almost too perfect. Good afternoon, Dad, he said, shaking my hand. Sorry to drop by unannounced. A patient cancelled and I used the gap to come check on you. I let him in. His discreet cologne filled the room. On the wall, the photo of Claire and Julian's wedding watched over us, she smiling, he with one hand resting on her shoulder. Mr. Roger told me you haven't been sleeping, he remarked as he sat across from me. What's going on? I hesitated but ended up telling the story, this time in more detail. The secret phrase, the figure at the door. Julian's face barely shifted. Now and then he nodded, as if he were taking invisible notes. You're still deeply hurt, he said at last in that voice he used on television during his interviews as a psychologist. It's normal. The brain can create all kinds of things when we are grieving and feel guilty. I'm not hallucinating, Julian, I whispered. Those footprints were there. Maybe some neighbor's kid passed by barefoot, he replied. But the call, in my opinion, is a mix of memories surfacing. You and Claire were very close, and she died unexpectedly. You haven't really made peace with that guilt. I looked at him, unsure whether to feel offended or understood. Look, I can help you. Not as your son-in-law, but as a psychologist. He continued, come to the clinic. We can talk calmly. It doesn't mean you're crazy, it just means you don't have to carry this alone. I don't want to be pumped full of strange pills, I shot back. He smiled. We'll just talk to start with. If we ever needed medication, I'd refer you to a psychiatrist I trust. One step at a time. He pulled out a notebook and jotted something down. Tomorrow at 3, I'll be waiting. I blocked the hour for you. I nodded out of politeness. After we chatted a while about trivial things, he stood to leave. Before stepping out, he brushed his fingers along the frame of Claire's photo. I miss her as much as you do, he murmured. So do I managed to answer. When he closed the door, the house filled with that heavy silence left by people who seem kind, yet take the air with them when they go. To distract myself, I started straightening the bookshelf in the living room. I hadn't given it a proper cleaning in a long time. I pulled out some old books. Suddenly a stack tipped and something slipped loose from the back. It was a cream-colored envelope, yellowed at the edges. My heart lurched. I recognized the handwriting on the front instantly. For Dad. Don't be mad until you finish reading. Claire's handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a folded page dated 2 weeks before the accident. Her sloping letters filled the sheet. It began, Dad, I don't know who to talk to. I'm afraid you'll be angry, but I'm more afraid of staying quiet. I swallowed and kept reading. Claire wrote that she thought Julian was cheating on her, that he seemed too close to a patient, a woman who kept showing up at the office. She said he came home late, lied about his schedule, and got angry when she questioned him, accusing her of being dramatic, jealous, distrustful. I'm scared, Dad, she wrote. He's controlling me more and more. He doesn't like me going to your house so often. He says you make me weak, that you make me dependent. He doesn't want me working outside. He says the house should be enough. If anything ever happens to me, Please don't believe everything Julian says." I folded the letter with trembling fingers. The world around me seemed to shrink. Breathing hurt. Guilt crashed over me in waves. I had always thought well of Julian, attentive, helpful, always ready to drive me to the doctor. I always assumed Claire was too sensitive, too suspicious, and my daughter had left me this sign I had never found, simply because I had never moved those books. I lifted my eyes toward the wedding photo. The expression on Julian's face, which I had always read as love, suddenly looked like something else. My cell phone buzzed on the table. A message from Julian. "Dad, tomorrow at 3. Don't forget. I'll be waiting at the clinic." I stared at the screen for a long time. In my head, I heard Claire's voice from the letter and the voice from the early morning call, both saying the same thing. Don't trust Julian. It was too much of a coincidence to shrug off as chance. For the first time since Claire died, I felt something truly didn't add up, and I could no longer pretend not to see it. I couldn't sit still in the house. My head rang with my daughter's words. "If anything ever happens to me, don't believe everything Julian says." That afternoon, I decided to go to the cemetery. The sky over Denver was overcast, but it wasn't raining. The thin mountain air bit at my cheeks. I took a bus and then walked between rows of graves until I reached Claire's, which stood at the far end near a dogwood tree with pale, sweet-smelling blossoms. I stood in front of the stone. Her name was carved clearly, with the date of her birth and the date of her death beneath it, which still felt like a knife to the ribs every time I read it. "Claire," I whispered, "if you're still angry with me, you have every right. But please don't torment me like this." I bent to straighten the faded plastic flowers in the small vase. That was when I saw something at the foot of the grave, a small old doll with a faded red dress. I recognized it immediately. It was the doll Claire had cherished as a child, the one she used to say had to live with me because she felt safe in my house. After she died, I put it away in a box of keepsakes in the closet. I had never taken it to the cemetery. My throat closed. "This is impossible," I muttered. I almost ran home. As soon as I walked in, I went straight to the bedroom closet. I dragged down the plastic box where I kept Claire's things. Baby clothes, elementary school report cards, birthday cards. I rummaged through everything. The red dress doll wasn't there. I dropped to my knees on the floor, gasping. If I hadn't taken it out, who had gone into that box? Julian had never shown any interest in those things. No one else had access. Or had it been Claire, the same Claire who said on the phone she was trapped between life and death? A sharp bang on the front door made me jump. "Uncle Andrew," a young man's voice called. "It's me, Matt." I'd forgotten. My nephew had once promised that if he ever had work nearby, he'd come visit. I opened up. It was my brother's son. Denim jacket, black backpack, hair a little messy. He had so much of my brother's look when he was young that it almost hurt. "Hey, Uncle Andy," he smiled. "Sorry to drop in out of nowhere. I was doing a segment for the radio station nearby and thought I'd stop by." I led him into the living room. He set his backpack down and sat. His eyes went straight to Claire's photo on the wall. "It still hits me every time I see her there," he said. "Feels like just yesterday she was teaching me how to write summaries for school." I managed a faint smile. "You sound just like your dad," I said. He chuckled. After a while talking about lighter things, I ended up telling him what had been happening, the 1:00 call, the voice like Claire's, the footprints, the doll, the letter. Matt's expression turned serious. "Uncle, this sounds like the cases I talk about on my podcast," he said slowly. "Stories that look like ordinary accidents, but there's something underneath. Do you think Claire's death wasn't an accident?" I asked. "We have to be careful," he replied. "I don't want to accuse anyone without proof, but that letter is crystal clear. She suspected an affair. She wrote about control and manipulation. That's a huge red flag. And Julian's a psychologist, a good guy, polite, helpful," I murmured, out of habit. "And precisely because he's a psychologist," Matt cut in, "he knows how to handle people's minds. He knows exactly what to say so everybody believes him." I let out a long sigh. So what do I do? Do you still have the accident file? Newspaper clippings, police reports, anything? He asked. I nodded. I went to the bedroom and came back with a brown folder I kept in a drawer, photocopies of headlines, the police report, some photos I had always hated to look at. Matt spread them out on the table. His eyes moved quickly from one page to another. Look at this, he said, pointing to a news article. It says they found strange skid marks at the scene and the airbag didn't deploy when it should have. I remember reading that, but I didn't really understand it, I admitted. The police just wrote possible system failure and left it at that, Matt summed up. But in a lot of cases I've investigated, airbags get disabled on purpose. It's a common trick when someone wants a crash to look like an accident. The hairs on my arms stood on end. Do you think Julian could do something like that? I whispered. I didn't say that, he replied. I'm saying we can't rule anything out. When you mix infidelity, control, power, and money, you get motives. I stared at the black and white photo of Claire's car, smashed at the side of the road, burned on one side. Nausea rose in my throat. Will you help me find out? I asked very quietly. Of course, he answered firmly. Beyond any case, this is for Claire. And for you. That afternoon, Matt started calling his contacts, friends who worked in local media, an old classmate who'd done an internship at the police station. He dug up old news online on his laptop. Here it is, he said, pointing at the screen. The police considered continuing the investigation, but the family didn't file a complaint, and the husband accepted the report. So it all ended there. I remembered those days. I'd been too shattered to think of anything. Julian handled everything. I just signed whatever papers he put in front of me. Dusk had fallen by the time Matt left, promising to come back with more information. If anything happens, call me. Don't stay alone, he said before climbing onto his motorcycle. The house fell quiet again. I no longer felt only grief. There was also a rage burning through me, at Julian, at myself, at everyone who had convinced me it was nothing but a tragic accident. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, thinking about the cemetery, the doll, the letter, the skid marks, the airbag. I checked the time. 12:58 a.m., 2 minutes to 1. My heart beat harder. From the dark hallway I could see the landline on the living room table. The previous night its ringtone had sounded like a scream. This is impossible, I whispered. It won't happen again. The clock struck 1. Immediately the phone began to ring, slicing through the air. I almost fell from the shock. My knees felt weak, but I forced myself down the hallway, breathing hard. I grabbed the receiver with an icy hand. Hello? Hi, Dad. It was Claire's voice again, lower, raspier, as if it were coming from very far away. Why are you doing this to me? I asked, eyes full of tears. If you are Claire, why didn't you appear when I was losing my mind 4 years ago? Why now? On the other end, I heard a sigh. I'm sorry, Dad, she said. I was trapped. I couldn't come back. Trapped where? I asked. Between life and death, she answered as if saying something ordinary. I can't leave because something here hasn't been resolved. Someone is keeping me tied. Who? I asked, although one name was already hammering at my skull. There were a few seconds of silence and then, barely more than a breath, she said, Don't trust Julian. I went mute. The living room seemed to shrink around me. If you really are Claire, give me proof, I said, trembling but firm. Give me a lead. I'm old. I can't take any more frights. I need something concrete. On the other end, she drew a deep breath. Go to the place where I was born, Dad, she whispered. The place where you saw me for the first time. They hid something there. Look for my name. I pictured the small community clinic where Martha had given birth to Claire decades ago. I was about to ask for more details, but the line went dead. No dial tone, only the ticking of the clock and my own breathing. I set the receiver down with no strength left in my arm. I looked toward the door. I was tempted to check if anyone was outside, but this time I didn't go near it. That night, I made a decision. The next day I would go to that clinic. I was done sitting still. The following morning my head ached as if someone had hit me, but my mind was set. I had just stepped out of the shower when the gate buzzer rang. I peeked out the window. Julian's white car was already parked outside. He was early. I opened the door. He appeared as impeccable as always. Beige shirt, briefcase, a calculated smile. "Good morning, Dad," he said. "Sorry if I'm bothering you this early. I kept thinking about you last night. I was worried." I nodded stiffly. "Come in." In the living room he sat facing Claire's photo. His eyes lingered on it for a second and then returned to me. "You look exhausted," he observed. "Did you have the nightmares again?" I wanted to tell him it wasn't a nightmare, that it had been real, but I already knew where that conversation would go, straight back to hallucinations. I kept quiet. "I'm serious about the session at the clinic," he insisted. "You need a safe place to let everything out. I already reserved today at 3. If you want, I'll drive you." "I'm going out this morning," I replied. "I have things to do." "What things?" he asked. His voice stayed soft, but there was a hard edge hidden at the end of his words. I didn't answer. I knew that if I mentioned the clinic where Claire was born, he would laugh it off. Julian smiled, but not with his eyes. "I know you've got a lot on your mind, but you really shouldn't be going far alone," he said. "You almost fainted at the grocery store the other day, remember? I worry about you." His tone was that of a father scolding a child, not a son-in-law concerned for an elder. A flicker of anger rose in me. "I'm old, Julian, but I'm not a child," I replied. "I'm not trying to control you," he hurried to say. "It's just that you're the only family I have left since Claire's gone. If anything happened to you..." He let the sentence hang in the air and sighed. "Anyway, if you insist on going out, at least let me drive. Then we can stop by the clinic." The word "let" sounded more like an order than a favor. I studied him. Part of me wanted to defy him out of sheer stubbornness. Another part was too tired to pick a fight. "I'll let you know later," I said at last. "Right now I just want to have breakfast in peace." Julian stood silent for a heartbeat, then got up. "All right, I don't want to pressure you," he conceded, "but think about my offer. You need professional help, not just creepy stories your nephew uses for his podcast." I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean? Matt's a good kid." "He is," Julian said, "but he makes a living off sensational stories. Don't let him turn you into material. Sometimes the line between facts and drama gets blurry." He left soon after. When the door closed, the house felt larger, yet colder. My plan to go to the birth clinic deflated. My body didn't feel up to crossing the city that day. Shortly before noon, Matt showed up again, this time carrying his laptop and 2 bottles of soda. "Uncle, I've got updates," he said as soon as he sat down. "But first I need a favor. Do you still have Claire's laptop?" I nodded. "It's in her room. I never had the heart to open it." "Can I try?" he asked. "There might be emails, notes, something." We went into Claire's bedroom, which had been nearly untouched for years. The air smelled of dust and old things. On the desk, her black laptop still lay closed. My hand trembled a little as I lifted the lid. Matt turned it on. By some miracle, it still worked. "What password did Claire use?" he murmured. I glanced at the framed photo beside the laptop, Claire laughing. "She hated complicated passwords," I said. "On her phone, she used my birthday. He tried combinations of my name and various dates. Nothing. After a few attempts, an idea came to me. "Try light in the heart," I whispered. Matt eyed me. "Seriously?" I nodded. It was the sentence she had adored since she was little. He typed it. The screen spun for a moment and unlocked. I didn't know whether to feel joy or fear or both. We began to dig through her folders. There were work reports, spreadsheets, documents I didn't understand, until Matt found a folder called Personal with a tiny padlock icon but no password. Inside were several text files and copies of emails. "Look at this," he said, opening one titled, "Why I'm Afraid." Claire's words filled the screen. We read slowly. She described how Julian had started forbidding her from going to gatherings with co-workers, how he exploded if she got home a few minutes late, how he secretly checked her messages and calls. Then she wrote about a patient, a woman labeled F in the file, whom Julian seemed especially invested in. There were late-night messages, sessions that weren't on the official schedule. Claire's sentences were painfully clear. She felt trapped. Every time she confronted him, he twisted things around and made her feel guilty. "You're being dramatic," he told her. "You're just like your father. He taught you to distrust men." At the end, she had written a line that made me want to scream, "I'm afraid Julian would rather save his reputation than my life." "Oh my God," I whispered. Matt pressed his lips together. "This is serious, Uncle," he said. "This is a powerful motive. If Claire ever threatened to expose him to the ethics board or the police, his career was over." I remembered how she had once mentioned the idea of leaving him, and how I, fool that I was, had always answered, "Talk it out calmly. Don't make rash decisions." I covered my face with my hands. My chest burned. "It isn't all your fault," Matt said softly, resting a hand on my shoulder. "No one can see what's inside someone else's head. The fault belongs to the one who hurts." We went back to the living room, our thoughts full of jagged fragments. Matt started to assemble the puzzle out loud. Infidelity, control, a suspicious accident. Later that afternoon, I had to run to the market for vegetables. Matt offered to come with me, but I told him I needed a bit of air alone. Normally, the bustle, the fruit smells, the calls of the vendors would distract me. Not that day. I had just finished haggling over some peppers when something made me stop dead. Across the street near a soup stand, a woman stood still. She wore a gray jacket, her hair pulled back, and in her left hand she held a folded blue umbrella. My heart stopped. It was Claire's umbrella. From that distance, her face looked exactly like Claire's. "Claire," I whispered. The woman raised her hand and made a small sign, tapping her index finger twice against her temple, the exact gesture Claire used when she caught me skipping my checkups. The shopping bag nearly slipped from my hand. People all around went on with their lives. No one seemed to notice her. A motorcycle passed between us for a second. When it was gone, the woman had vanished. I stood in the middle of the street, breathing wrong. The soup vendor looked at me strangely. "You okay, sir? You gonna cross or not?" he asked. I forced a smile, grabbed my bag, and went back home on shaking legs. That night, sitting in my wicker chair, I got a message from Matt. "Uncle, I found something else about the accident. I'll tell you in person tomorrow. I'm convinced this wasn't just a simple crash." I stared at the screen, not sure whether to feel relief or panic. Outside, the wind tugged at the thin curtains. In my mind, I kept seeing Claire's face at the market, the blue umbrella in her hand. Whatever that was, I was increasingly certain my daughter's death was nowhere near as simple as the police report or Julian's gentle version had said. The next morning, Matt came by early, his expression far more serious than usual. He flipped open his laptop on the living room table. "I talked to my friend who interned at the police department," he said. "He managed to look at some internal notes on the case. The official report calls it a single vehicle accident, but the mechanic who inspected the car recorded something else. The braking system showed clear signs of tampering." "Tampering how?" I asked, my throat tight. "As if someone had loosened or removed parts," Matt explained. "It wasn't normal wear and tear. They just had no way to prove who did it, so they let it drop." The room tilted slightly. "And the airbag?" I whispered. "According to those notes, it should have deployed," Matt went on. "Either it was defective or someone disconnected it. That's why I keep telling you this crash stinks, Uncle." "Then we have to go back to the police," I said, rubbing my forehead. "We can," he agreed, "but if we walk in there with nothing but suspicions, old letters, and gut feelings, they might open the file for an hour and close it again. We need something more solid." "And what would that be?" I asked. "We need to know what Julian is hiding," Matt replied. "He holds a lot of Claire's secrets, and other people's too." I stared at him, alarmed. What are you planning to do, Matt? He sighed. I have a friend who works nights as maintenance staff at Julian's clinic. He told me Julian sometimes stays there alone and there's a room no one's allowed to enter. I think we need to see what he keeps in that room. The idea scared me and at the same time stirred a fierce curiosity. You're going to break in? I whispered. It's not that I want to, he said with a bitter half-smile. It's that someone has to, if you're up for it. That evening we worked out a plan with his friend Diego, the skinny custodian at the clinic. Diego agreed to open a side door for us late at night, once everyone had left. I'm not going upstairs with you, he warned nervously. If anything happens, I'm the one who'll get fired, but if you need to get out fast, text me. My hands were cold, but I nodded. Night fell. Harmony Wellness Clinic. Dr. Julian Harris, clinical psychologist, glowed in soft letters on the front of the white building on a quiet street. We slipped in through the side stairwell Diego had shown us. Some of the hallway lights were off. The hum of the air conditioning was the only sound. I'd been there before in daylight. Clean waiting room, soft music, scent of essential oils. At night it looked like an abandoned set. Matt opened Julian's office with a key Diego had somehow obtained. The room was exactly as I remembered it. The gray couch for patients, the desk chair, a small table with tissues and a ticking little clock. The special room Diego mentioned is back there, Matt whispered, pointing to a discreet wooden door in the corner. He says it's the archive for patient files and recordings. It was locked. Matt took out a paperclip and a tiny screwdriver. Where did you learn that? I asked under my breath. Friends at college, he replied. Don't worry, Uncle. We're just looking for the truth. The minutes stretched like an hour, and then the lock gave with a soft click. Inside was a narrow room lined with metal shelves and filing cabinets. On a small table sat an old computer and several external hard drives in a row. Matt picked up a black one labeled Recordings Sessions, Year 1 to 4. Here we go, he murmured. He plugged it into his laptop. Folders appeared. Dates, times, numerical codes instead of names. There are too many files, he said. Let's focus on the year after Claire died. He scrolled until he reached sessions from about a year after the accident. Let's try this one. He opened a video. The camera sat in a corner, angled toward the couch. In the familiar chair, Julian took notes. On the sofa, a woman sat in profile. Her face was only half visible, but as soon as she spoke, my blood turned to ice. Most of the time I feel like I don't belong in my family, she said. It's like I've been a guest my whole life. They treat me well, but I don't look like them. I don't know who I really am. Her tone, the way she sighed, even her hand movements, all of it echoed Claire. Not identical, but disturbingly close. Do you remember when that feeling began? Julian asked gently in the recording. I think since I was a kid, she laughed nervously. I know I'm adopted, my parents told me, but more and more things aren't adding up. My birth date, the story of my delivery, it's like they stitched the story together from scraps. My eyes locked on the screen. Matt shot me a quick glance and kept watching. So you feel like your life doesn't really belong to you, Julian summed up. The woman nodded. Sometimes I think somewhere out there there's a family that's really mine and I don't even know their names. We watched several sessions. In one of them, the woman said with a shaky laugh, My parents say I was born here in Denver, but once my mom slipped up, she said I was born in this tiny clinic that's practically shut down now. She corrected herself right away, but it had slipped out. A small, nearly forgotten clinic in this city, the same kind of place where Claire had been born. I never quite feel at home, the woman went on. Sometimes I dream of another woman calling me daughter in a different voice. I don't know if it's just a dream or something more. Matt stopped the video. The room felt even narrower. You hear that, Uncle? He whispered. That's too many coincidences. I took a deep breath, hugging my arms around myself. What do you think? I think Julian has a patient whose birth story crosses paths with yours in a very strange way, he replied. Maybe he chose her because she reminded him of Claire, or maybe there's something deeper. We shut down the computer and put everything back exactly where we'd found it. We relocked the archive door with the same care, and each creak of the floor sounded to me like Julian stepping out of the shadows. We went down the stairs and slipped out through the side door. The cold air outside tasted like freedom. That night, Matt dropped me off at home, made sure I ate something, and then headed to a friend's place at the hospital to secure copies of what we'd seen. "We'll pick this up tomorrow," he said at the door, leaning on his cane because even then his leg had been bothering him from an older injury. "And please, Uncle, if anyone calls or knocks, don't open." His words made my skin prickle. I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room with the light on, staring at the door. The clock crept toward 1 again. At 12:59, I was already standing. The phone rang right on time, as if someone had set an alarm. I grabbed it before the second ring. "Dad." The voice was the same. "Claire." I dared to say her name aloud. "What do you want from me?" "I'm sorry it's taken so long," she said, sounding so tired it hurt. "There are so many things binding me. He doesn't want me to talk." "He who?" I asked, though I already knew. "The person you trusted," she answered. "The one everyone thinks is so good." Tears streamed down my face. "You asked me to go back to the clinic where you were born," I said. "Why?" "Because that's where it all began," she whispered. "That's where they wrote my name and then erased it. They lied to you, Dad. They lied about me." I pressed my hand to my chest. "If you want to know who it is that walks past your house every night at 1, she added, "go back to the place where I was born, where they pulled me into the world." The line cut again. I lowered the phone slowly and leaned my back against the wall. In my mind, the pieces started to fit together. The strange accident, the letter, the patient who felt she didn't belong in her family, the small clinic, the possibility of a rotten adoption. That night, my fear changed shape. I no longer feared a ghost as much as the idea that the last 40 years of my life had been built on a colossal lie. The next day, I would not just go to that clinic. I would make whoever necessary talk. The morning was gray and cold when Matt and I climbed onto the bus that would take us to Hope Community Health Center on the edge of Denver, where Claire had been born. "Are you sure you're up for this?" he asked, gripping the pole. "I've stayed silent too long," I answered. "If I don't do this now, I never will." We got off near a dusty corner and walked down a narrow alley. At the end stood an old building with a faded sign, Hope Community Health Center. Paint peeled off in patches. The courtyard was empty. At the reception window sat a middle-aged woman with a brown shawl and glasses. Her name tag read, Carla. "Excuse me," I said. "I'm Andrew Miller. My wife Martha delivered here in the 80s. I'd like to see the birth records from around that date." She looked up and gave a polite smile that tensed a little at the edges. "Oh, sir, that's very old," she said. "Those records are stored in the back. Not all of them survived. Some were damaged by humidity." "That's all right, I can wait," I replied quickly. She sighed. "Well, better come with me then," she said. "We'll look together." She led us down a narrow corridor to a small room packed with metal shelves bulging with brown folders, some leaning precariously, all smelling of dust and mold. "These are from that decade," she said, "but I should warn you the doctor who worked here back then passed away. Dr. Walter died a few years ago." The name tied a knot in my stomach. I remembered him vaguely. Glasses, flat voice, quick hands. We started searching. Matt pulled out folders and read the dates on the labels. After a while, he exclaimed, "I think this is it." The folder had the same day as Claire's birth. Inside were handwritten forms. One read, Mother, Martha Miller. Father, Andrew Miller. In the box, number of babies born, there was a 1, but underneath you could see the ghost of another number that had been corrected. It looked as if someone had written something else and then covered it. "The ink is old," Matt said quietly. "It really looks like it used to say something different." My throat burned. "What does that mean?" Carla came closer and frowned. I couldn't say, she answered. I didn't work here back then, but I can tell you there used to be rumors about a doctor who played with birth records, something about adoptions under the table. Adoptions? I repeated, barely able to get the word out. That's what people said, she admitted, but nothing was ever proven. Back then, things like that were buried quickly. No one wanted trouble. My head buzzed. Was there another birth that day? I asked. Another baby. Carla checked other documents in the same folder. Here it says there was only one birth that day, she replied. But look at this. She pointed to a tiny code in the corner and another strange cross-out. These numbers don't quite line up. I had to hold on to the table to stay on my feet. A few years ago, Carla added, an older couple came asking about births from that time. They said their daughter had been adopted here by that doctor. I searched everywhere and couldn't find anything in the official logs, just little notes like these. They left very discouraged. Silence filled the room. Could you make me copies of these pages? I asked at last. Of course, she said gently. Give me a moment. We left with a set of photocopies in hand. Outside, the wind felt even colder. On the bus back, I kept staring at the sheets, the corrected number, the codes, the doctor's signature. The word adoption buzzed around my skull like a trapped fly. Uncle, Matt said cautiously, it's very likely something was hidden the day your wife gave birth. Do you think there was another baby besides Claire? I whispered. I don't want to declare anything yet, he replied, but that possibility is very real, and the one doctor who knew for sure is dead. I turned to the window and watched the houses roll by. Inside me, fear, anger, and an old sadness jostled for space. How could I, her father, not know whether I had brought more than one daughter into the world? We reached home at dusk. Matt had to go back to his room to organize all the documents and recordings. Don't open the door to anyone you're not expecting, he reminded me before leaving. I'll be back tomorrow. When he left, the house felt even larger and emptier. I tried to make dinner, but chopping vegetables took all the focus I had. My mind kept drifting back to the clinic, to Dr. Walter, to that couple who left with no answers. At nightfall, I turned on every light in the house. I'm usually frugal, but that evening I didn't want a single corner in the dark. A little after 8, the screech of skidding brakes outside cut through the air, followed by the crash of a motorcycle hitting the ground and several voices shouting. I rushed to the porch, my heart in my throat. Down the street, neighbors were gathered around someone lying next to a fallen motorcycle. I recognized the jacket and backpack. Matt, I shouted. I hobbled as fast as my knees allowed. He lay on the asphalt pale, his face twisted in pain. Uncle, he whispered when he saw me. The brakes went out all at once. Did anyone call an ambulance? I asked on the verge of tears. It's on its way, one neighbor answered. Looks like his leg's broken, but he's conscious. Matt gripped my hand. Uncle, please, he gasped. Don't lose my backpack, everything's in there. Don't worry, I told him. I'll keep it safe. The ambulance arrived. I wanted to ride with him, but he insisted I stay. I'll text you, he said through gritted teeth as they loaded him in. I need you okay. I went back home with the backpack over my shoulder, shaking. In a matter of hours, I had discovered my wife's delivery might not have been what I always believed, and my nephew had nearly died when his brakes suddenly failed. I left the backpack in my bedroom and sat for a while in the living room, just trying to breathe. I changed clothes and took a hot shower to loosen the nerves. Hair still damp, I walked into the dining room, drying my hands on a small towel, and froze. Someone was sitting at the table with her back to me. A woman, hair pulled into a simple ponytail, gray jacket hanging from her shoulders. On the table were 2 cups of tea. Faint steam still rose from one of them. I stood rooted to the floor. The woman turned slowly. It was Claire's face, exactly as she'd looked in her last years before the accident. No wounds, no blood, only that calm, slightly sad expression. Dad, she said gently, sorry for letting myself in. I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. Claire, is that really you? I stammered. She smiled a little. What do you want me to be, Dad? She asked. If you want this to be just a dream, I can disappear. If you want it to be real, I'll sit right here. Her words were strange, but my head was too full to parse them. All I could see was the way she held the cup, index and middle finger hooked through the handle, thumb on top, the other two fingers supporting the bottom, exactly the way Claire always had. She pointed to the chair across from her. Sit down, she said. You've been to the clinic. You must be exhausted. I sat as if pulled by an invisible thread. Did you know? I asked. Did you know about the clinic? I know a lot of things, she replied slowly. They lied to you, Dad. They took something from you, and the person you trust has been lying ever since. I studied her carefully. She was identical to Claire, but there was the faintest difference in the way she furrowed her brow, the way her eyes tightened. I told myself it was the light, or the years she'd been gone. I don't understand, I murmured. What are you? A spirit? A hallucination? Another daughter? I'm an old man. Don't play games with my head. She lowered her gaze, then met my eyes again, this time with tears glistening. Whatever I am, there's one thing that doesn't change, she said. I'm on your side. She tilted her head slightly toward the front door, as if listening. He's not going to stop until he shuts you up, she added. At that exact moment, someone pounded on the door. Bang, 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 bang. Julian's voice sounded from outside. Dad, it's Julian. Are you home? I looked back at the woman. The chair across from me was empty. The second cup still steamed gently. I stood up on unsteady legs, grabbed the cup and carried it to the kitchen with trembling hands, almost spilling it into the sink. I went back to the living room, drew a deep breath, and opened the door. Julian stood on the threshold, hair mussed, sleeves rolled up, wearing an anxious expression. You took a while, he said. I was in the bathroom, I answered curtly. His eyes swept the room as if searching for someone. Are you alone? Yes. He came in without waiting to be invited. His gaze moved from the dining table to Claire's photo. Did you hear about Matt? He asked suddenly. My heart clenched. What happened? I feigned ignorance. He had a motorcycle accident at the corner, Julian explained. I drove by a little while ago and heard the neighbors talking. They said his brakes failed. He's at the hospital now. Even though I knew, my body still shuddered. Did you see him? No, they'd already taken him, he said. Funny thing, the world. People who stick their noses too deep into other people's business sometimes get a little warning. The way he said it chilled me. What do you mean? I demanded. He gave a thin smile. Nothing specific, just speaking in general. We sat facing each other. He leaned forward, fingers interlaced. I think your condition is getting worse, he said bluntly. You're hearing voices, seeing people who aren't there. Now your nephew's had an accident. It can all be linked to stress, lack of sleep, confused thoughts. I'm not crazy, Julian, I cut in. There are things that have been wrong for a long time. You're going to start again about Claire's accident, he sighed. Claire herself told me not to believe you, I snapped, my voice rising. His eyes narrowed for a heartbeat, but his face quickly smoothed back into concern. The letter you found is from a young woman overwhelmed by relationship problems, he said. She's gone. The ones left are you and me. We're family. The word family fell like a trap. I don't want anyone taking advantage of you, he went on. Your nephew Matt lives off lurid stories. He could turn you into just another character. Would you like that? I stayed silent. Part of what he said sounded reasonable. Another part dripped poison. That's why, Dad, he continued, eyes fixed on mine. I think the best thing would be for you to move into an assisted living facility. A good one with nurses, doctors. I'll handle all the paperwork. Your assets will be protected. All you'd have to do is rest. I remembered the woman at my dining table saying, he's not going to stop until he shuts you up. Let me think about it, I said slowly. Julian sighed and nodded. Fine, but don't take too long. You can't go on like this. He stood, smoothing his shirt. Before leaving, he held my gaze for a long moment. I care about you, Dad, he said in a neutral tone. I don't want you to get lost. When the door clicked shut, I remained standing in the same spot. The word lost sounded more like disappear than confused. That afternoon, a message came from Matt at the hospital, a photo of his leg in a cast, his face pale but smiling. Uncle, don't worry, he wrote. I'm not dead. I have to stay off my feet, but the mechanic said there was a loose bolt in the brakes, like someone had unscrewed it on purpose. My heart lurched. Another message followed. I got the contact info for the older couple from the clinic, the ones Carla mentioned, Mark and Nora. They live in a neighborhood not far from you. If you feel up to it, you could visit them. I'll help from here over the phone. I replied, I'll go. Mark and Nora's house was modest, painted light green, with a small front yard full of potted plants. I took a taxi in the late afternoon, gripping the folder with the clinic copies in my hand. Nora opened the door, her face tired, headscarf worn, eyes wary. You must be Mrs. Nora, I asked gently. I'm Andrew. They gave me your address at Hope Community Health Center. Her features tightened immediately. We've already told them everything we know, she said quickly. None of this is our fault. We're simple people. We just wanted a child. I'm simple people too, I replied, and all I ever wanted was a child as well. May I come in, just for a moment? She hesitated, glanced back at her husband, who had appeared behind her with white hair and shaking hands, and finally opened the door wider. We sat in the living room. I laid the photocopies on the coffee table and opened the record with my name on it. 40 years ago, I said, my wife gave birth at that clinic. The same doctor who arranged your adoption signed my daughter's delivery record. In my file, numbers are crossed out and notes don't make sense. All I want to know is whether the baby given to you could have anything to do with me. They exchanged a look. Nora's lips started to tremble. Mark, she whispered. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a breath and began. We were desperate, he said. We couldn't have children. Someone told us about a doctor at that clinic who helped couples looking for a baby. We went. We paid. The doctor said the baby was from a young woman who couldn't raise her, that she'd be better off with us. Did he give you any names? I asked. Never. He shook his head. He just said, don't ask too many questions. And we obeyed. Tears pricked my eyes. Where is that daughter now? I asked, my voice breaking. Here with us, Nora answered. We named her Valerie. She's an adult now, but she's been confused for years about who she is. She knows she's adopted. She's always asking about where she came from. We have no answers. Her name pierced straight through me. Valerie. The patient in the recordings had never said her name, but her story fit too well. We went to the clinic, Mark added. We asked questions. Maybe that's what Carla told you about. But we came back empty-handed. That's why we took her to a psychologist to help with her anxiety. Nora finished the thought. A kind, polished man, Dr. Julian Harris. My chest hurt, even though I'd already suspected it. How long has he been seeing her? I asked. The first time was about a year after that famous psychologist's wife died in a car crash, Mark explained. My wife said, she looks so much like Valerie. After that, Nora couldn't rest until we took our daughter to see him, without knowing he was the widower. At first she got better, Nora went on. Later she started coming home late from sessions, sometimes soaked, saying she'd stayed talking. If we asked too much, she'd get angry and say we didn't understand her pain. I pictured the woman in the grey jacket, the blue umbrella, the voice on the phone. Julian's shadow ran through everything. On the taxi ride home, the wind pushed through the open window. I no longer felt like just a sad widower. I felt like a man pushed into a fight. That night, around 11, the landline rang again. Dad! The female voice sounded drained. I'm tired. He forces me to keep coming. He tells me what to say. He says you have to believe him or everything falls apart. Who is he? I asked, though we both knew. The one who always wears crisp shirts and soft cologne, she replied. The one who tells people you're crazy. My eyes filled. Then let's make sure he stops calling the shots, I said. But I need you to be honest with me. Do you want to help? There was a long silence. Then the voice answered, breaking. I'm scared, Dad. But yes, I'm tired of staying quiet. We hung up. I picked up my cell phone. My fingers shook as I texted Julian. I've been thinking about the assisted living place. Tomorrow at 11 at night, come to the house with the papers. I want to discuss it alone and sign. I hit send and exhaled slowly. I was done waiting for the night to come for me. I would be the one to invite the monster into my living room. The next day, my stomach ached from nerves. In the afternoon, Matt called from the hospital. Are you really going to let him in tonight? His voice was rough. Yes, I said. I'm sick of lies. Then record everything, he urged. Set your phone to record in a corner. If you get him talking about Claire, about Valerie, about the breaks, about the adoption, I have a friend on the force who can do a lot with one good audio. I'll do it, I promised. As evening fell, I tidied the house, not a full cleaning, just enough to clear from the living room any object that could become a weapon in his hands. I set my phone on the bookshelf with the voice recorder running, camouflaged between two novels. The clock dragged its way toward 11. At 11:05, I heard his car pull up outside. I peeked through the curtain, the familiar white sedan. I opened the door before he could ring. Come in, I said. Thanks, he answered with that thin smile. He stepped inside, set his briefcase by the sofa, and glanced around, making sure we were alone. You seem calmer, he observed. I'm glad. Did you bring the papers? I asked. He nodded and pulled out a neatly organized folder. Here's the special power of attorney, he explained. If you sign it, I can handle your entire situation. Arrangements for the residents, medical decisions, management of your finances. You won't have to worry about a thing. I took the folder but didn't read it all. I caught words like representation, decision-making authority, assets. If I sign this, I said slowly, I'm basically handing you my whole life. I'm trustworthy, Dad, he replied pleasantly. I'm your family. I closed the folder. Let's talk truth, I said. His eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? I went to Hope Community Health Center, I said. I saw the record from when Martha gave birth. It says we had one baby, but the crossed-out numbers suggest there might have been more. And I met a couple who adopted a baby through the same doctor that same day. Their names are Mark and Nora. They told me their daughter, also born that day, has been in therapy with you for years. She feels like she doesn't belong in her family. You record all her sessions and keep them in that little locked room at your clinic. I've seen them. His face hardened for a fraction of a second. His hands, relaxed until then, tensed on his knees, although his voice stayed smooth. That was 40 years ago, Andrew. The doctor is dead. It's easy for people to mix stories. The girl's name is Valerie, I cut in. They told me she was so shaken when she saw the news about your wife's accident, a woman who looked so much like her, that she ended up in your office. You said it yourself. A patient with identity problems in the same city. Interesting, isn't it? Silence thickened the room. I know more than you think, I went on, my voice trembling but steady. I know about the patient who feels like a stranger in her own home, who suspects she was adopted at a shuttered clinic. I know you keep her sessions on a hard drive. I watched you talking to her on video. I know you made her believe you were saving her. A sharp smile flashed across his face. And what conclusion do you think you've reached? He asked. That it wasn't a coincidence Claire's car lost its brakes, I whispered. That the airbag wasn't broken by chance. That you had the motive and the means. That you manipulate Valerie the same way you've manipulated me. That you used her resemblance to my daughter to play with my heart. If you've already decided I'm a monster, he said, tilting his head, why did you invite me? Because there's one thing I still don't understand, I answered. You've gone to such lengths to make me think I'm crazy. calls, knocking, dolls that move. Why? What's all this theater for? At last his eyes turned cold. To shut you up, he said plainly. To discredit you so you'd do the job yourself, so everyone would see you as a confused old man and no one would believe you if you ever started digging, even if you dug into your own daughter's death. Even that? I asked. Even Claire? Death sounds harsh, he replied, almost calmly. I simply allowed circumstances to line up. Cars can fail, roads can be wet, a woman can drive while crying. The police need a clean story, and I gave them one. My fists clenched. You're a psychopath, I spat. He just shrugged. The world isn't kind to people who know too much, Andrew, Julian added. Your nephew almost joined Claire. Shame his brakes only half failed. A dull roar filled my ears. I almost threw myself at him, but at that moment the familiar soft knock sounded from outside. Knock, knock, knock. We both turned. Don't open it, Julian ordered, jumping to his feet. There's all kinds of weirdos out at this hour. My heart raced. She's here for me, I said, not for you. I walked toward the door on shaky legs, driven by something stronger than fear. I looked through the peephole. There she was, the woman in the gray jacket, hair pulled back, eyes shining. Her lips moved slowly. Dad, I'm cold. Open. I turned the key and flung the door wide. She stepped inside. The cold night air came in with her. I could feel Julian behind me, tense. Claire, I whispered. The woman met my eyes and shook her head very slightly. She gave a faint smile. No, she said. My name is Valerie. Time stopped. Her voice was a little deeper, her mannerisms almost identical. I felt my knees give way and took a step back. Dad, when we were born, we were twins, she said slowly, Claire and me. But I was sold to another family. I grew up in a house where I never fit, always feeling like something was missing, until I met him. She made the tiniest motion toward Julian. He was the first person who told me my blood was the same as his wife's, she went on. Tears blurred my vision. Why didn't you come straight to me? I asked. Why all the phone calls, the footprints, the doll? Because he told me that's how it had to be, she answered, voice breaking. He taught me phrases, memories, secrets. He told me you'd thrown me away to keep my sister, that you deserved a lesson, that you'd only believe the truth if someone scared you to your core. I looked at Julian. He'd gone pale, but his eyes burned. You fed her our memories, I said. The light in the heart phrase, the hidden letter, the doll. You had access to everything. Claire's laptop, her phone, her videos. While she slept, you could read and watch. Power belongs to the one who controls information, Dad. I just used it, he said with disdain. Valerie looked at me, tears streaming. I thought he was saving me, she said. I thought someone finally understood this empty space inside me. He showed me a DNA test, done with Claire's toothbrush and a sample of mine. He said, look, your father chose to throw you away. He kept your sister and discarded you. I filled up with hate. That's why I went along with his plan, calling you at 1, leaving the doll on the grave, sneaking in and out of your house, scaring you, everything he told me to do. I stepped closer and took her hand. It was warm, very real. Daughter, I whispered, you are my daughter too. None of this was your fault. Valerie sobbed harder. What you did was wrong, I added gently, but what they did to you was worse. They built that wrong inside you. What a touching scene, Julian cut in, his voice suddenly sharp. Father and long-lost daughter teaming up to accuse me. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a syringe filled with clear liquid. Relax, Dad, he said. It's just a sedative. You'll sleep for a good long while. Tomorrow everyone will believe you had an episode. An elderly man, delirious, terrified by voices. No one will listen to your accusations. He took a step toward me. I backed away and stumbled over the rug. Valerie moved in front of me. Don't touch him, she said. Move, he snapped. Without me, you'd still be lost, not knowing who you are. Without you, Claire would be alive, she answered, her voice shaking. Then everything happened at once. Julian lunged at us. Valerie grabbed for the syringe. They struggled. I saw the needle flash dangerously close to both of them. Frantic, I looked around and grabbed the heavy vase from the side table. Without thinking, I swung it at Julian's back with all the strength I had left. The glass shattered. Water splashed across the floor. He lost his footing, hit his shoulder on the edge of the coffee table and rolled, tumbling down the 2 steps that led to the small back patio. He lay groaning, the syringe skidding away into a corner. I was shaking from head to toe. Valerie clung to my arm, trembling just as hard. Outside, neighbors started shouting. "Mr. Andrew, everything okay?" someone called. In the distance, for the first time in a long while, I heard the clear wail of a siren drawing close. That night, for the first time, Julian stopped being the shadow pulling every string behind his smile and white coat. For the first time, the story belonged to us. The following days were a blur of police officers, ambulances, and statements. Julian didn't die. He broke some bones and got a head wound but stayed conscious. This time, though, there were too many eyes and ears. Several neighbors had seen him with the syringe in his hand. Most importantly, Matt showed up limping on his cast, accompanied by a young officer friend carrying the audio from that night. In my living room, they played it on speaker. Julian's voice talking about loosened brakes, disabled airbags, how he'd manipulated Valerie, how he had planned to make me look insane. It all made my stomach churn, but the officer kept nodding, mentally underlining every sentence. With this, with the clinic records, and with Mark and Nora's statements, we've got plenty, he said. He won't be able to hide behind his credentials. A few weeks later, Julian's name was everywhere in the news. Prestigious psychologist implicated in wife's death and in manipulation of multiple patients, the headline said. On TV, they showed his photo, with a smaller picture of Claire in the corner. I turned it off every time his face appeared. Matt used his contacts at the radio station and on his podcast. He produced a special series about the case. I was afraid he'd turn it into a spectacle, but when he asked me to listen, I did. "This is not a ghost story," he said in one episode. "This is a story about how someone can use other people's pain to control their minds and their lives." I listened from my chair, Claire's photo in front of me, my fingers resting on the frame. The legal process moved slowly, as they always do, but this time I wasn't alone. Every time the police summoned me to testify, Valerie sat beside me and held my hand under the table. Our relationship didn't heal overnight. At first, we were 2 strangers linked by blood and by a twisted history. Sometimes I called her Claire, by mistake. Sometimes she looked at me as if still wondering whether any of this could be real. One afternoon, weeks later, we sat together on the porch. The wind carried the distant shouts of children playing somewhere in the neighborhood. "When you were younger, did you feel like you missed someone you couldn't name?" she asked suddenly. "Yes," I answered without thinking. Many times I woke from dreams feeling I had more than one daughter. I'd scold myself, telling myself it was just loneliness. She smiled sadly. "I used to dream about another dad," she said. "Not my dad, Mark, another voice. He called me daughter in a way that made my chest ache like it does now." My eyes misted over. "Forgive me," I whispered. "Forgive me for not coming to find you, for not knowing you existed." "It's not your fault," she said, shaking her head. "The guilty ones were the doctor who stole one of your daughters and sold her to another family, and then Julian, who played with all of us. We're victims, Dad. That's what we are." That word, Dad, warmed my chest. A few days later, we went to the cemetery together. Matt insisted on coming, leaning on his crutch. I carried white flowers. Valerie held a purple bouquet. We stood in front of Claire's grave for a long time without speaking. "Hi, Claire," I said at last, my voice trembling. "Sorry for bringing her so late." Valerie swallowed, then spoke softly, as if afraid to wake someone. "Hi," she whispered. "I don't know whether to call you my older sister or my younger one, but thank you Because of you, all the lies came out. Because of you, I found Dad. The dogwood leaves rustled lightly overhead. I closed my eyes and let the tears fall without shame. I promise I won't waste this second chance, I murmured. I can't give you your life back, but I can love Valerie the way I should have from the beginning. We laid the flowers together, side by side. Matt took a photo of our backs, the two of us standing before the grave, but he didn't say a word. Back home, I began to change small things. I took down Julian's photos from the walls. I put the pictures of him with Claire into a separate album. I didn't destroy them. I wasn't going to erase the part of my daughter's life she shared with him. I just didn't want his face watching me from every room anymore. In the living room, next to the large photo of Claire in her graduation gown, I placed a new one. Me, Valerie, and Matt sitting on the wicker sofa, all three of us smiling a little awkwardly. Someone who didn't know our story would probably assume we were cousins who happened to look alike. Some nights Valerie stayed over. She told me about her childhood in Mark and Nora's house, her school years, the parties where she always felt out of place. I told her about Claire as a little girl, afraid of the dark, and how we invented our little phrase about turning on the light in our hearts. We didn't try to fill in every gap, we just shared bit by bit, so the hole between us remained painful but bearable. Months later, when Julian was officially in custody awaiting trial, I woke up one night for no particular reason. Out of habit, I checked the time, 12:58 a.m. Before, seeing that hour would have set my heart racing. This time, I only sighed. I walked down the hallway. The landline rested quietly on the small table. The lights were off except for a little lamp in the living room. From the guest room, I could hear the muffled sound of a video. Valerie laughed at something she was watching on her phone. A moment later, a message pinged on the group chat Matt had created for the three of us, titled Family. Those sounds were life, not ghosts. I stopped in front of the front door, now locked with just one turn of the key. There were no shadows on the other side, no damp footprints, no soft knocks. Only the cool night, more friend than enemy now. The clock struck one chime, then another, then silence. I smiled. 1 a.m. again, I murmured. You don't scare me anymore. I went back to my room, but before turning in, I paused by the pictures on the wall. Good night, Claire, I whispered. Good night, Valerie. I switched off the lamp. The house sank into a peaceful darkness, not the threatening kind from before, but one I could finally make peace with. And for the first time in 4 years, I fell asleep without waiting for a phone to ring at 1 a.m. If you made it all the way here, type the word twins in the comments so I know you're one of the ones who stays to the end. Don't forget to follow the page, leave your like, and share this story so more people start wondering who might be calling at 1 a.m.